Phil had something to say about my interview with former head of Blizzard Boston.
Mishka, I'm exhausted talking about culture.
I
am exhausted. That being said, this is one of your best podcasts, in my opinion, and I really encourage people to go out and listen to it. To give you a teaser, like one of the things you guys are willing to talk about is the idea that like low morale doesn't mean poor performance or doesn't mean not hitting the company's goals. And so like you spend a moment and ponder like whether or not low morale even matters. And so I thought those were moments that like kept coming up in the podcast, which I thought was awesome. But I also couldn't help but think that there's a difference between what people actually want to talk about when they talk about culture is not culture. And I think Kim Nordstrom's definition in Up, Down, Up, which I know everyone read, was that culture is patterns of behavior over time. But I don't think people want to talk about that. I think what they want to talk about is institutional policy, right? They want to talk about rules that they can create, which ultimately shape a behavior. And when I kind of look at like revealed preference rather than stated preference, founders spend very little time thinking about organizational design. Like they aren't out there thinking about like who should report to who, how should I set up my titling system or not have a titling system. Like very little time is spent doing that beyond like, I would argue, a couple of self-help books. And I do think that, like the reason that Netflix is like no rules one is because it actually told it like it is, which is that like we play to win and we hire and fire and operate like it. And ultimately like people understand over time that ultimately action and incentives drive institutional behavior and they just let it rip. I think anything less than that is not a sufficient institutional policy, but that's what we should talk about is like policy, not really culture is an outcome of policy, or at least it's one of the things that we think are the most important factor. And you heard it in the podcast, right? Like that's something that he felt that he had misunderstood, which is that you can influence it. He's like, no, you absolutely can.
I'm equally tired because like the success of a company, I think it's like a three-legged stool. You got the culture naturally, a bit, meaning like how people work, but then there's really important part, which is capital. And then equally important part, which is timing. And every time there's a successful founder or a CEO, they just focus on the culture because that's the one where they had the most effect on. And then you kind of forget like, oh yeah. And then we raised, a couple of $1 billion and yeah, it was a perfect timing. Market was going 20% year over year and so forth. But I'm really curious to hear what you think about this next investment, Phil, which is Distinct Possibility Studio raising $30 million funding from Bitcraft for a launch of Reaper Actual, an open world AAA shooter with Web3 elements. Is this Gonzalo's Off the Grid, but instead of a battle royale, you're going open world?
I don't think Off the Grid got enough credit, to be honest with you, because I think what it did prove is now that they have EGS, which, oh boy, if EGS is the thing you're holding up, you're in deep shit. But at least they have EGS now, which is a mainstream distribution platform for these type of games. I still think without Steam, everyone has bowed to Steam, and Web3 will bow eventually too. So I think this is really in Gabe's hands right now. Gabe's game over at Valve, I think, really holds the future of Web3. But there's been nothing interesting in this space. Like we've basically stopped covering it, and I think that's for sufficient reason. They haven't given us something to cover. Like Off the Grid, if we want to look at an update, I think it's probably doing fine. Is it a crazy big success? No. They have this weird subscription thing. Let's see how much capital they're going to burn by continuing to operate this thing. Why are you doing this? I have no idea.
Yeah, and it's $30 million.
Yeah, in this economy,
it's just,
no,
it's just wasting money.
Wait, they just raised this recently?
Yeah, $30 million in a AAA shooter, not to just build, but also launch.
No. They've raised $30.5 million to date.
This is led by John Smedley, who was really a big MMO figure early on and also helped set up some internal studios at Amazon Games.
Yeah, okay.
It's not no one. There's a track record here. Like, I think that's the most important thing. It's team rather than business model. Business model can always change.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, on the other news, Kotaku has been acquired by a Swiss-based conglomerate for a cash sum that is undisclosed. So I guess good for them. And Google has launched an indie game fund initiative targeting LATAM region, where they give between $150 to $200K to indie game studios based in Latin America.
It's pretty admirable that Google is doing funding Like we talk about how challenging it is that VC and PE are kind of drying up in the money they're handing out. So
it's always great when somebody's bringing money into the gaming industry. I just wonder, what are the incentives for Google to write checks? And actually, these checks are so tiny. So I'm trying to understand, like, just how does this make sense? But I guess, I don't know. Maybe they're working on some kind of a PC platform or something.
yeah, they do have their PC platform initiative. You know, you can build on Android on mobile and it automatically goes to PC. It's also specifically to the LATAM region. So that's kind of interesting.